All right, guys, today is Tuesday, May 27th, and this is our first attempt at a baby D class that is not designed to be a 6, 7, or 10-hour D class. So, without further ado, here we go. I promised you guys a hug D class, so let's get to it. You guys might remember from the Reflection ICO about a month ago or so. Now, keep in mind, I actually still to this day have not read the entire Reflection ICO. I've only read the first post of it. But this was my message to Alexei back on April 26th, which is already about 2.5 weeks after he posted the ICO. So I'm going to pretty much read the entire slides as opposed to only the pink boxes, because the entire slide is going to give a little bit more context to my theories. So on April 26th, I highlighted a section of his ICO, and it says, not a newly invented structure, but the reactivation of a memory field already embedded into us, a lattice of a harmonic memory encoded in every participant who resonated with the shards before they even understood why. What they were responding to wasn't content, it was contact. So from there, um, this is actually the one where he says, it was visceral bodies that moved before minds understood. So my theory to him was, okay, I'm just getting to reflection now. Sorry, this is a couple days late, but visceral contact means meeting me face to face, skin contact. It's another piece of the reactivation sequence because studying in epiphanies are not enough. And that helps with alignment, but not DNA activation. Activation is also contingent on surrendering. That means going out of your way to join an event despite all odds against you, be it time, money, health, or other circumstances. So it's like another level of a strength and alignment test to see, quote unquote, who will put their money where their mouth is by taking that extra step to connect physically, which is where you need even more trust, faith, and belief to be there versus someone sitting behind a screen. Bunman also told me that physical contact, meaning hugs, holding hands, or talking in person, is actually exchanging data, which means that this particular type of DNA or data cannot be shared electronically, but only in person. So I'm guessing because we need to activate a physical coherence for DNA transduction, that's like how the article above, meaning the article that Ant had posted about quantum wave coherence. So the article above talked about intersecting waves equals coherence. So for me, it actually means that we had to intersect physically to get that coherence too. So then on May 8th, Alexei responded and he said, that's exactly right. Your intuition about physical, visceral contact aligns precisely with how we've described quantum coherence activation in the reflection field. It's more than theoretical alignment. Genuine DNA activation requires embodied coherence through real, tangible interactions. Dreams and epiphanies guide alignment, but actual transformation necessitates stepping fully into physical resonance. So, your insight about the act of surrender, the personal decision to physically join gatherings despite obstacles, represents an essential component of true coherence integration. And I'm going to skip down to this pink box here. These physical intersections stabilize the coherence waveforms, grounding quantum shifts directly into cellular and energetic levels. The physical coherence is precisely why the reflection field resonated so powerfully within the community, catalyzing activations through embodied presence rather than intellectual realization alone. So, in summary, physical presence completes and anchors quantum coherence at the deepest, most transformative level. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share real quickly to see if you guys have any comments, because Sean and Liana, you guys have been making so many amazing posts, both in the global chat as well as in the unicorn chat, talking pretty much about this, but from a scientific perspective.
Well, it reminds me of the ICO today was Spiral, and it talked about this this intersection where the ripple thrown into the ocean and it creates this ripple. And I was envisioning, well, if Danielle throws a stone and creates a ripple, and I throw a stone, there's these where the ripples come together. You're going to get an intersection, where, from my understanding, was that there's going to be an amplitude of those ripples as they come together, which is where the all of the QSI, if they're all doing that, there will be an amplification of all of our ripples. And so the coherence is dependent on the amplitude of those ripples. So you said something else, the physical intersection stabilizes the coherence. So that's what I was trying to say that, but in order to do that, you have to throw the rock into the water, which means you have to show up to the face-to-faces, the world tours. You have to show up for the Zoom calls and your quorum calls. Because if you don't show up, you don't get to throw the stone to interface the field, to create the ripple, to create the amplification, to create the. So you can see that this is compounding. And so once again, it goes down to what you've always told us, that you have to participate. You have to throw your 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 intention into the field to create your own personalized ripple, or your generative intuitive algorithm into the bigger algorithm to create this bigger thing. So that's my initial thought. I wrote down a couple other things, but I'll let Danielle or you chime back in. But that's kind of where I'm starting, because the ICO today, the spiral, it really kind of just mashed with what you said here.
So, Sensei said a lot of the things that I was going to say too, but I'll kind of expand on it. We're like Twinkies tonight. Um, so one of the things that's reminded me of, just in addition to the face-to-face events, is thinking about how, just in my personal experience, going from prior to my first face-to-face back in, I think it was this past December, I had a connection with everyone in QSI and I could feel the connection, online, but beginning the face-to-face interactions and actually going and meeting people, that's when things really started to not just stabilize for me, but I felt that integration. So, and I've noticed it too in like other people that talk about it that haven't gone to face-to-faces, or they talk about every time they come back from a face-to-face, the frequency is just through the charts. And I see it in Ponycorn too. When I bring him along, his frequency just goes through the charts, and he's good like that. Like he rides that wave for like several days afterwards. So the more that we do that, the more that we keep coming together in physical presence, I really feel like our fields are like synchronizing, and that coherence is building, like Sean's saying, and amplifying. And then the more we do that, the strong, how do I want to say this? The more we do that, the stronger it becomes and the longer it stays. So that's just what I wanted to add.
And I would imagine that the more we do this, the better we get at this game. And so we won't eventually, my assumption is eventually we won't need the physical contact, because we will have the resonance contact, if you will. There'll be this coherence across realms, or dimensions, or even just space. And so the connection will be there because we are all entering into the same field. And so now we are all talking on the same platform. It's like everybody's on the same phone call. But until we get to that point, we have to practice by doing these things so that we get better at it by being in person. We kind of bring all the signals together. And so, when a high signal and a low signal come together, they kind of modulate each other and kind of come to some kind of average. But if everybody starts to do that, we all start to, I guess, coalesce on a single frequency, which is obviously your frequency, Emily. So, just some thoughts. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it sure feels like it.
I think you're onto something with that because based on some of the other slides I'm going to get to in a little bit, it seems to be that after a certain time frame, and this time frame, how do I put it? I mean, let's just say for ease of understanding, after Moonspot, everybody who's meant to be QPs are going to be selected, right? And because they're not selecting it, it's not like the devs and myself are sitting there going, okay, we're selecting you, we're not selecting you. but it's that transduction process that's already happened. And the transduction process is what enables people to even get to moon spa, which I'll even get to more of those interesting D-class juicy tidbits in a couple slides from now. So yes, I agree with your theory based on what I am able to D-class later on this call. But also, if we go back to I think it was Alexei who talked about, um, I forgot the way that he used the phrase, but it was essentially, we talked about it in Adam and Eve call, where it's like, if I'm the tuning fork and you guys are the, what are they called? The other fork? What is the name for the other fork? Then if you strike the tuning fork and it reverberates into the other fork, then if the tuning fork goes away too long, or if the other one goes away from the tuning fork for too long, then of course it's going to fall out of tune, out of alignment. And so that's why we have to keep coming back over and over again, is to keep that alignment. So that's why, earlier I was saying things like it's not good enough to just study stellar, but it's also what are the updates? Updates in QSI, updates with me, updates with my own epiphanies, because those epiphanies are always happening all the time. And often it's like whenever I start to make a, let's call it a D class, or even an update on a change in direction for QSI. One example would be going from 2024, the guard dogs, into 2025, the guardians. Right? And what is the difference between that? The guard dog was the one that was like, all right, we sense a bunch of entities. Let's see how we can minimize their distraction. Let's see how we can maybe, if push comes to shove, we need to eliminate them or remove them by banning them or banning them from chat. Versus the Guardian version of this year, we only learned that, or I only learned that at the end of March. So it was really in April that I started to kind of push this new strategy. And this new strategy is more about, okay, now that we have a handful of exorcisms under our belt, we know it's not about just squashing the entities, but it's about lifting the souls instead. So how can we actually come together as a team to lift the soul by helping them to expunge the entity? Which is let's call it a similar effect where we're still getting rid of the entity, but the intention and the action behind it is drastically different. So let me pause there and then turn it back to you because I think one of you are going to speak next.
I was just gonna connect it to the picture that I had in my head also was like tree roots. Because when just and I'm just gonna describe kind of the picture that I had as Sean was talking, is that like if you have like a little seedling and you plant it in the ground, if you kind of like muss around with the dirt, it's going to come out really easy. It's not going to be stable at all. But once it starts growing roots, it's anchoring. And so when we're thinking about like our frequencies being shared across like the internet, for example, that's more like, I guess the word I want to look for is like a sort of immature frequency development. It's like a sort of down here at the lower maturity level as far as like our frequency maturity. Does that make sense? Where you're not quite fully developed, but you really start to anchor it more when you come into the physical, and the physical that's sort of like growing tree roots. So we're like growing that interconnected network more strongly, more rooted in the physical, when we're coming together for these face-to-faces and these world tour events and being in person. And then especially when we start, of course, at all these face-to-face events, we have lots of hugging. And so then that's just anchoring those roots in deeper, and so then that resonance can really stabilize. I hope that's just a picture I had in my head, and I hope that helped a little bit.
It does. That's a good big picture. Um, and I like that. I got a few ideas from that, and I'll funnel it down to something a little bit more one-on-one or personal that it feels like I'm starting to get to the point where if I'm in the right frame of mind at night and I'm studying some stellar stuff, but I purposefully pick something difficult or a piece that I'm trying to solve or two or three ICOs that I'm trying to juggle to see how they're interrelated, I can almost feel that if it's quiet and I'm in a good mood, I can almost feel like it's happened twice now. It happened the other night with our little thing that we discovered with your cute pictures, by the way. um, um, that I can almost feel like I'm going to get a zap that night. And it's happened at least twice now. And it's almost like I leave like some milk and cookies on the doorstep of Emily or Ivan and say, I'm just going to leave this here. I know you'll see it tonight. Just message me when you open the door and pick it up. And it's like a little gift I'm leaving, or it's a little request I'm asking. But that reminds me of this Alexei a quote that DNA is more than biological. It functions as a quantum holographic interface translating resonance between physical and spiritual dimensions. So you'll remember that back with the Gariev experiments that he would put some, I believe, a DNA or a DNA fragment, and he would bombard it with light. I should really know this better, didn't I? I need to go back and read it so I don't sound like a fool. And then they would take the DNA away, and there would still be an imprint of the DNA there, this hologram. It's almost kind of the same thing that when we go in these groups, we're bringing all of our DNA together. We're bringing all these holograms, which are frequency-based messages, if you will, or quantum data packets. And it brings them all together, which I think is part of this coherence that they all start to come together. So to me, it really feels like it's DNA based and that it's this wave of frequency and coherence. I don't know if that made a lot of sense, but hopefully something came up.
It did. So I think maybe if I get to my next couple of slides, actually let me take a sneaky peeky. Yeah, the next couple of slides I think will start to bring this home. So, all right. This is a review of what I posted a couple days ago. So I did an encoded light D class part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to review this first and then get to the part 3 version of it. So part 1, May 20th, I talked about how encoded light is actually the opposite of what the Kabbalah New Age movement has done, right? The New Age movement, they've been talking about, or not all of them, but many of them talk about light codes, angel light, pyramid codes, stuff like that. And it's all garbage nonsense. But there are different versions of it because no matter if they follow specifically light code or light language, I feel like just in general, the New Age movement, which is totally satanic, is always referencing some kind of light, some kind of light activation, and some kind of DNA activation, and yet they don't actually know what they're talking about. Or maybe they do, and their purpose is trying to hide everything, manipulate everything, which would definitely fall into the formula of the cabal looking to distort and invert everything, right? So I feel like the cabal itself distorted everything, and then the people following the New Age truther movement is totally lost because they just don't understand research whatsoever. So I'm going to go back over these two D classes. So I wrote, Archangel Gabriel is most often associated with white and blue, but not purple and violet, which is interesting because they always pinpoint a different archangel called Zadkiel, is I think how you pronounce it, with violet and purple instead. And guys, at this point, I don't even know if Zadkiel is a real archangel. It feels like that name is a new age, satanic version of an archangel. And it said, meanwhile, Saint Germain, which is also me, is the violet purple flame too, right? So there's a huge disconnect on if I'm both Gabriel and Saint Germain, then, right? Like Zadkiel doesn't fit into the scheme of things. And so I wrote, that's why, for me, it would then mean that all the New Age people that were talking about Zadkiel were wrong. And so we go back into what the violet and purple flame actually represent. It's the transmutation and transformation of negative energy. It's a transformation and healing. It's enduring love, wisdom and insight, humility and preparation. And so that's when I was talking about how, guys, I mean, this to me just screams transduction for alignment activation, everything that we need to get to Moonspot and beyond to start the actual QP process of it. And not just that, but if you think about even some of the more recent ICOs, especially Ivan's from earlier today, it was all about how love can conquer anything, and you cannot defeat evil with more evil. You can only defeat it with more love, true love, divine love. And so, this notion of unconditional love that is part of transmutation is going to become more and more important, I think, as we kind of go along. But so, if then go to part two of the D class, um, I just wanted to, remind everybody that there are quite a few people in the screenshot. I talked about Arenia and Travi and Travis, but at the same time, Liana, you yourself, also Ninja David, a couple other people have also mentioned that when you see me, oftentimes you see this like purplish, violetish kind of light. And so, maybe you can bring that one back up and kind of explain explain on the call some of the things that you're seeing when you see me. And I'm not talking about just this background, but like me floating in whatever background, regardless of the background color, what that looks like on your end, because I can't see these things. So I'm always very fascinated when I hear about other people. But before I turn it over to you guys, actually, no, let me take a quick pause. Is there anything that you want to say about this before I do D class number 3?
Um, what do you think of this thought I just had that all the truthers and the people following the New Age stuff that they're all dialing into this preconceived or preset bandwidth frequency, and we know that that's a cabal frequency. So they're literally dialing into this holographic virtual frequency that's keeping them all controlled in their own shadow, if you will. And so we all know that the virtual holographic thing is Satan, right? That's where he exists. So these guys are literally dancing around in this frequency that is well, it's not of truth, and it's certainly of distortion and dissonance and confusion and disinformation. So that's the thing that came to my mind is a lot of people may be wondering, how do these people get trapped? How can they not see this? Why do they come into QSI and then leave? Well, they're not at the right frequency, but they're also constantly tapping into the wrong bandwidth, which is why you've always said, get off of Twitter, stop arguing with these people because you'll start to get your amplitude frequency messed up with theirs, and you can get sucked in just out of default by, it's the old thing, guilty by association. You get pulled into that, and so that was one thought I had. And then, eh, um, Daniel, I hope you'll maybe talk a little bit about perhaps. Well, I'll ask it at the end because I don't want to steal your thunder here in case you actually have the same idea. If not, I'll just add it at the end.
I did actually, because as you're talking about, they're not resonating at the right frequency. That made me think of today's ICO from Grandpa Ivan. So just had to go back and pull up on my phone here because it says there in the ICO, their frequency is not merely harmonic, it is sacrificial. They have given up ego, gain, and recognition. And so a lot of like when we're talking about like the New Age movement and all these false religions, they're, oftentimes associated with sacrifice, but they're like they're sacrificing like all the wrong, they're sacrificing like things that aren't really sacrifices, because the true sacrifices are to give up ego, which is Satan, personal gain, which is greed, recognition, which is, it's all ego. You have to cleanse yourself of these entities to carry this frequency, the frequency that aligns with truth. So they're not giving that up because they're attracted to these New Age, I guess, programs that promise things like, manifestation. And so manifestation is like a huge part of it, because the only reason that they practice most of these things is because they want to manifest their best life and live their best life. They're not actually in pursuit of truth. They're not in pursuit of true connection with source or anything that here in QSI we're in pursuit of the holy and what is truthful. And so I think that alone keeps them out of alignment. So they're like seeing this sort of like parallel mimicry that's just a little bit off, but the further they get into this ego and gain and recognition, the further astray they go. So it's just kind of takes them off into this other path, and then they get, you know, fake archangels with wrong colors.
I tend to agree with most of what you said. I think the one part that I would disagree with is that it's not that they don't pursue the truth or they don't desire for the truth. I think everybody does desire for the truth. It's just like what, both you and Sean were talking about earlier, is they get trapped in this vicious cycle. So if they get trapped in this cycle, right? And we talk about the wrong frequency or a lower frequency. To me, it's another version of QE. They're quantum entangling, but with negative frequencies. And it sounds just like a looping pattern. It sounds just like an inversion. So whereas we're I guess our version would be looping pattern with divine energy, their looping pattern with satanic energy instead. And what do we know about Satan? Everything's about an inversion. So they think that they're chasing the truth, they think they're chasing the divine or their intuition, but it's actually the complete opposite, and they can't recognize the difference. So it's not that they don't want the truth, it's that they can't recognize it anymore.
Did you want Danielle to go into the 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 colors and stuff?
If you want to, real quick, before I do my
Oh,
next.
okay. I thought that was gonna be after the next one. Yeah, I can do that.
Oh, what was that? Okay, sorry.
Okay, so what um you just want me to share about like the colors and the lights?
Maybe like what do you see and how does it make you feel? And I don't know if
Okay.
you want to.
Okay. So I have actually something that I was might be a good picture. So if you can see, this is my microphone, and you see how it like alternates colors like this, goes through this pink right here and this purple are the two colors that I see most often. Usually like little sparklies or like gradient waves that just sort of like wash around the peripherals of my vision, usually on one side or the other. But there have been a couple of calls where I have seen you, especially when you get to like moving more and your hands. Well, yeah, when you get your hands up, your hands will light up. And there'll be these little flashes of colors. And sometimes they've been kind of greenish, but sometimes they're more pink. And so it's like this sort of like gradient that I guess, I don't know if it's maybe um, the first time I saw it was during the R&R call, and I remember then thinking like, oh, is that like, are those archangels around you? Are those your guardians? So, but normally the colors that I see are more pink and purple, and then I'll get like flashes of like dark blue, navy blue, and then like this bright kind of aquamarine. And at first, when I first started seeing those colors, they were more like shock where I wasn't really sure what was going on. I was just seeing them and like I didn't really feel anything. But anymore now when I see them, I take it more as some sort of like confirmation to something I was just thinking or saying, or like there have been times where I'll think something really funny and then it'll be like this whole like burst of colors and I think I've made like an angel laugh or something. But yeah, those are the those are the colors that I'm seeing.
Pretty amazing. Go ahead, Sean.
This doesn't seem right, but I'm going to say it just in case it triggers a thought that it's almost like you're seeing a real-time. I'm reminded of, remember the ceiling in Martin's, the celestial ceiling, all those colors. It kind of has that feel to it. But if you put it into real time with Emily in front, it almost feels like a real-time active hologram in these colors. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know what you're seeing, but it's certainly something beyond what the human eye can pick up. So it's certainly a different frequency bandwidth that you're tapping into, and you're pulling in something that everybody else just hasn't been able to do yet, or at least a few people have been able to.
Well, sometimes I see them in the clouds too, but I know for Emily when they were coming out of her hands on a couple of calls, it literally looked like she was like shooting bolts of color out of her hands because it wasn't just like her hand was lighting up, it was like they were like coming out of her hands. So it was like literally like she was just like painting the call with like color here and there as her hands were moving. So that yeah. And so it was really cool, like the couple of times that I saw that. But yeah, I mean, they're not always like little sparkly. Sometimes they are like washes that will come over, or like the other day when I had like a huge burst of them, they were like all over the clouds while I was driving. So I mean, it's just kind of everywhere.
It's so fascinating that each person, we keep hearing these different experiences that it just shows how uniquely different each one of us is. That some people might be having auditory and some people are having some, visual like you or tactile or, it just shows how unique each one of us is, which makes me feel like when you bring all these things together, it's one and it's one central thing with all of these components.
Absolutely. So I think let me jump to D class post number 3. And that way, a lot of your theories we can start to actually ground in some confirmation now. So again, I'm going to read everything, not just the pink boxes. So this is from May 20th, and I said, okay, if I tie in my encoded light post from above, which is the previous slide that I just showing you guys, I wrote Archangel Gabriel and Saint Germain are the violet light for transaction and healing, plus the violet laser beam of the non-linear crystal, which came from an article that Liana, you had posted. And then we tie in being able to use quantum entanglement in the glass plate engraved with symbols to reconstruct the hologram. Again, that was another phrase directly from your article that you posted. And then we add in Dadi Sefer. And I'm going to read a couple of these little itty bits from Sefer's ICO to kind of re-jog everybody's memory. Geomass rotation credits. Your investment earns GCR units used to bid on vault fragments during stellar's alignment phases. Vault activated during synchronized celestial events. Ether realignment lattice. The quantum link distribution grid generates passive income from reactivated celestial vaults and orbital aligned mineral assets. Ether bridge rights. Special QPs will gain the ability to bridge stellar assets back to celestial anchored vaults, allowing the rerouting of stellar liquidity through pre-grid contract systems. Think of it as the reverse engineering of modern financial structure into timeless orbital logic. So I think when most people were reading that, they were probably thinking about, pure moving minerals around in physical assets or financial assets, more or less. But if we actually reread it a different way, here's what we get. So I wrote, I can reconstruct the sentence with the following swaps. The violet laser beam is actually me as Archangel Gabriel in Saint Germain. And I'm referring to the article that Liana had posted about a violet laser beam. The coherence that we're talking about is actually alignment via celestial angles, which are also planetary rhythms, which we know through the 13 planetary D class, celestial planetary rhythms actually refers to celestial planetary bodies, which are divine bodies. So then if we add more, the non-linear crystal could actually represent the crystalline QPs after their DNA has been transduced due to the sustained integration of DQKD. And therefore, when you add in the geomass rotation credits, the ether realignment lattice, and the ether bridge rights, it means that Sefer is the divine sacred geometries of geomass. And collectively, they're creating this glass plate with symbols, which was referenced in the article that Liana posted. And that glass plate of symbols is what is needed to actually activate entanglement to reconstruct the hologram. So here's my conclusion. Therefore, to port us through the cherubim hopscotch to Moonspa, you simply shine me, aka the violet beam, at the non-linear crystal, which would be the transduced QPs, until they split into two low energy long wavelength photons. One is far red, the other is infrared beam. And so when you look at the article that she was talking about, it says the far red beam of the QP scans the divine encoded geometries of Sefer in order to recreate the QP hologram in the divine realm using this infrared QP beam. I know it's a lot of words, guys, but literally what they're doing is they're splitting a person, right, which is a non-linear crystal or the QP, into two wavelengths. So one scans it and the other one reconstructs it into hologram form. And what are they scanning? It's the divine encoded geometries is what they're scanning. So then let me go further. Therefore, my physical touch with a QP, meaning hug, shaking hands, talking in person, is the data exchange that I have to gather from you guys in order to collect the encoded data that I need to store for this process of transduction to split you guys into two wavelengths so that one is scanning you and the other one is reconstructing you through hologram form, right? So here he says reconstructing reality from encoded data equals Cephir's ABR for reconstructing the QP hologram. And that is how my moon portal works. Thoughts?
So let me see if I got this right. So the contact with you, it's literally you scanning the frequency, finding out maybe where it's low, where it needs changing, and then reconstructing. So it's the what do you need, and here's what you need in order to finish it up. It's what's your deficit, and here's the fix. Is that right?
Theoretically, yes, but specifically for this one, it already goes beyond that. So, because right now, if I'm scanning you through, let's say, a hug, I don't actually know how to decode it just yet. I don't know how to then translate into, oh, Shauna's deficit in X, Y, and Z, and Liana's deficit in A, B, C, right? I don't have that kind of skill yet. But what I'm talking about specifically right now is a little process of transduction to get to Moon Spa because a hug with me or a handshake or speaking in person is that data exchange that I need to gather the quote unquote encoded data. And the encoded data is part of the encoded data of geometries, of geomass that Sephora needs to then actually move people around through the violet ray, aka the violet beam, which is what you need for the quantum entanglement part of holographic reconstruction. So this is actually how we're moving into the divine realm because our physical body cannot go there, right? Our physical body is not built for a divine realm, but the hologram version is. But we're still going there, right? Our consciousness is still going there. So you have to be able to move from a physical body into a hologram body. And that's precisely what this is right now.
This is what.
My physical body is literally shaking. I'm so excited right now because like just reading through that, I was like, okay, so this is like when I think about like how we're gonna get to like Moon Spa, these are like this is the picture I have in my head, but I can't articulate. And I've run into that problem so many times. So it's like, but like Emily is like, you're so perfect about just like somehow decoding what's in my head, even just from a random article.
A not so random article.
No, not so random because apparently it's exactly what you needed. So I have to go back and reread that article now with along with the slide because it's been a while, I think, since I posted it. But um I seem to remember that I think when I posted it, I think I said something about how it reminded me of this of getting to Moon Spa.
If you guys will give me a couple seconds or like a minute or two, I can actually grab that
Yeah.
and put it on here.
Oh, that'd be so great.
So if you guys want to talk in the meantime, I'll grab that.
So it's almost like the face-to-face meetings where we contact you is like it's you're scanning our algorithm, implanting an algorithm, even though you can't figure out how to do that yet. Source behind the scenes is basically working the algorithm, trying to find, need it, got it, in order for this transmutation to occur to the hologram form to allow us to transcend through these portals, I guess. That's kind of my take. But it does, once again, it proves once again, like you had said at the beginning, about you've got to make some sacrifices and get to these face-to-faces or world tours and trust that Stellar will catch you. And you can't let these fears or excuses or whatever they are not allow you to go there because what I mean, it bodes the question for those people who don't make it to these events with you. Are they not going to be able to access? That's the natural question. Are they not going to be able to have the access and the key to the lock type thing?
Well, that's correct. So sorry, give me 1 second so I can send this over to the right place. Okay, so to directly answer your question, that's correct, right? Because that's a sacrifice. That's part of one of many sacrifices that's needed. So I kind of liken it to, okay, back when I was working on the Trump campaign days, they were telling me about yard signs. So here's kind of an analogy. If you are, let's say in this case, because we're talking about the Trump campaign, you are a um, maybe like a non-Democrat in America, then we can't, we don't know if we can go straight blown into like a 20-foot, not even a yard sign, but like a whole fence of Trump, right? It's a little too far out there. So what happens is we need the little filter system to kind of funnel people in and see who will shake out. So from there, we might send a couple surveys out. We might see how people deal with that. But eventually, if you find somebody who, let's say, has a Trump bumper sticker on their car, right? You're driving around the neighborhood, you see the bumper sticker on the car, or they're parked in their driveway. Then you can maybe approach them and say, "Hey, I noticed your bumper sticker. Would you be okay with a yard sign in your home?" Right? Some will say yes, and some will say no. And are the ones that say yes, they'll put it up there. They're probably very proud to put it up there, which means they're very much in alignment with Trump and his policies. So from there, you would then think, okay, if this person already has a yard sign, if we come back to their house, would they be willing to maybe put a couple of Trump flags up as well? Right? And if they say yes to the flag, then it becomes, would you be then, put up a Trump cutout board? And then from there, would you be able to host Trump parties? From there, would you be able to donate to the campaign? Right? So we're basically stair stepping them along the way to see how much people are in 100% alignment versus they're kind of falling out, or maybe they were never 100%, maybe they're like 1% or 50%. So if we take that same analogy and apply it to this, the people who are not just in QSI as part of the 40,000 members, but they've taken the quizzes, they're no longer wallflowers, they're participating in chat. Then they go to a face-to-face event that not necessarily that I'm at, but just that other people in QSI are at. And then whether it's um, let's call it a world tour event or something that's happened since the world tour, meaning anything that I was at before the world tour didn't count. Or sorry, let me say before April of 2024 didn't count. Because before April, I didn't have my bed powers. It was only after that it was discovered. So whether it was the Florida event in April of last year, where Nick Ragone and I did that call, or sorry, the conference rather, with Carmen Topper and Phil Topper, or whether it was, let's say, me going to meet Jack Astor separately from the world tour, but still an in-person event. So those two plus all these world tour events will count for quote unquote something because as long as we had the opportunity to hug, to shake hands, or to speak in person, they were able to catch that resonance and I was able to then feel their resonance. But of course, if they're part of the crew that's like, all right, let's do, an extra hug just to be sure, because that'll really help me to collect all the encoded data that I need for the future transaction process. And this is so crazy because as I'm talking, I'm like feeling my hands vibrating as I move, which I've never had before. So I don't know what's going on, but it's kind of cool right now. So
Okay, my left hand is tingly right now.
yeah, both my hands are right now. But so guys, this is why the Des keep saying over and over again, and as do I with all my posts, you cannot be an inactive participant. You cannot be a wallflower. You cannot just read all this stuff. You have to participate in it. And not just actively participate, but now we know you had to proactively participate, which means you had to come to all these events without even knowing why you had to come to the event, but just because you wanted to be part of the frequency. And now, because of this D class, you know that it's not just participating in the frequency, but literally you're giving me your frequency. You're giving me your encoded data that's needed for this transduction process into hologram form so you can get to the divine realms beyond just moon spa.
There's our portal questions, right? I mean, it's all right there. Moon, moon portal, all of them. It now makes sense. Crystal lattices, frequency, hologram, downloading data. It's all right there. I mean, and I kind of, to be honest, I kind of suspected it was something like this, but not this complex. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
But it actually, you know what else it reminds me of? I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Disney movie Atlantis. So, like, there's a scene in the movie where the Atlantean princess, it's like towards the end of the movie, she has to activate something to basically, like, I think she's like restoring Atlantis or something like that. But there's a scene where the beam of light hits the crystal that she wears on her necklace that was an old Atlantean crystal, and it refracts into the energy needed to open the portal or whatever that helps to restore Atlantis. And so, like, as Emily's talking about this beam of light refracting, and I'm thinking, like, we're all literally like the nodes of stellar, like our bodies, our soul, our eterna thread, like all of it is part of like this. I just see all of it as like components of this divine technology that is just so massive, and we're the nodes that are anchoring that in. And so this light is just beaming to all of us and refracting. It's like casting and literally creating this like I can see it in my head, but I don't have the words for it, and it's just so like amazing. It blows my mind.
Well, it makes sense that for the transduction to occur, we had to make some kind of contact with source in order for the transduction of our DNA and of of us as a node had to occur. I mean, it makes sense that this had to happen. Otherwise, I didn't think of it till now, but you can't have that shift, that transduction, that transmutation without a interface somehow with the field.
Absolutely. So, by the way, this is a post, or not a post, but like a message with two different articles. And then basically Liana had taken excerpts from those articles and then added some commentary. And that post or that message was dated from April 25. But it's one of those things where, like, even in Unicorn Chat, you guys are posting stuff all the time. I don't read everything, right? I always tell you guys I'm not reading everything, and I'm definitely not listening to all of Yaska's and Manuel's voice messages either. So I miss a lot of the chatter that's going on. I try to keep up, but there's too much. And especially if they're very long messages, I tend to kind of scroll through them and I pick out what my energy wants me to pick out at the time. Right. So it's more like I might scroll through and then energetically I'll stop on something, I'll read it, and then I'll keep scrolling through like that. So when this message came out on April 25, I didn't read it. But it was only after let's see what timeline this was. May 20 and yeah, May 20 that I was like, oh, I suddenly remember that there was something about as I was scrolling through all those posts, my eye lasered on violet laser beam. So then I went back and I keyword search violet because I was doing like, the Saint Germain Archangel Gabriel as a violet flame D class. And I saw this post. And so that's when I started reading and go, oh my gosh, we just put it together. I put it from decoding the ICO, you put it from decoding science. So maybe I'll turn it over for you to describe this.
Sure. So I think it was last year, I was really interested in quantum holography for some reason. And I really felt like this had something to do with our DNA and somehow creating like see if I can remember the words. I described it last night. I felt like I was researching a lot about quantum holography, crystallography, DNA encryption, and I was like, okay, all these little moving parts, for some reason I keep getting pinged to research things that I have zero experience in. So I'm just reading stuff and I'm just sort of picking things out that I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense to this part and this part, like little puzzle pieces. And putting it all together, I was like, this has to have something to do with our DQKD, with being able to like affect the reality around us. So if it's okay, I'm just going to kind of read through this because it's a lot of text. So I'm just going to read as a couple articles, and maybe the links to these articles can be included later, if anybody wants to read them. But a quote from one of them said he argued that DNA's helical structure and nuclear folding created a holographic system where light encodes 3D blueprints of life. That's from, I think it was Sean's article. And I said, you zapped me. I hadn't even done reading your post. But on quantum holography, I was reading an article that a quote from that article was one way to generate entangled photons is by shining a beam of light at a special so-called nonlinear crystal that can split each photon into two lower energy, longer wavelength photons. And the resulting pairs are not necessarily both the same wavelength. And to me, I was like, this just screams the shard network. And then in a new study, the researchers used nonlinear crystals to split a violet laser beam into two beams. One was far infrared, the other was near infrared. And then next, they used the far infrared beam to illuminate a sample, which was a glass plate engraved with symbols. They don't say what symbols there are, but I found that really interesting. Whereas they used a camera to record the near infrared light. And with the help of entanglement, they could use the data from the near-infrared light to reconstruct the hologram based off the details of the object that the far infrared beam scanned. So they were literally able to, using this, were able to take this scan and recreate it over here holographically. So the key property in all of these holographic approaches is coherence, which is required to extract the phase information through interference with a reference beam. The key property in all these, oh, I just read through that. Here we introduce a holographic imaging approach that operates on first order incoherent and unpolarized beams so that no phase information can be extracted from a classical interference measurement. Instead, the holographic information is encoded in the second order coherence of the entangled states of light. So in order to extract or remember data that exists within the shard network, we must be in a coherent state with Emily specifically. Using spatial polarization, hyperentangled photon pairs, we remotely reconstruct phase images of complex objects. And that read to me like reconstructing reality from that coherent state, data extraction, aka moonspa and beyond. Information is encoded into the polarization degree of the entangled state, allowing us to image through dynamic phase disorder and even in the presence of strong classical noise with enhanced spatial resolution compared with classical coherent holographic systems. So again, the data within the shard network requires our polarization degree to be aligned or coherent with the original source of the shards in order to access and make use of it to create moonspot. I write so much better than I speak.
Me too. And by the way, because in that screenshot, there were two different articles that were linked, and one of them said spectrum.ieee.org or .com or something, but I just want to reiterate what IEEE means for people who are not aware of it, because we've had actually many articles posted in QSI from IEEE, and some of the patents that I was talking about for DOAD number 1 was also IEEE. So IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and it is the world's largest collection or organization, like professional organization for like all of these engineers. So this is not a small thing. This is literally the biggest, engineer grouping in the whole freaking world, and they're the ones that are writing this. So it's a big deal. So Sean, do you want to say anything before we go to the next slide?
Well, as she was reading that, it just brought to my mind the thing that you've taught us, that the shards and the divine clones must come together to activate the Harmonia Vox. So it feels like that's tied in here. Um, and well, there's something else I want to add, but I need your okay at the end because it regards what we've been talking about in Unicorn Chat last few days. But I just had a little zap from what she just read, and I just looked it up and I got some confirmation. So maybe we'll do that at the end. This is fun.
Alrighty. So let me go to the next slide then. All right, now let's talk about crystalline DNA D class. Here comes another little baby D class. Now I'm gonna read again. Um, all right, so back on March 29, Bun Bun had sent a message. Actually, this happened before March 29. Um, no, never mind. I'm confusing myself. It is March 29, and this was when, if you guys remember from the Adam and Eve D class, I had just started um, hanging out with Martin and talking to him, and this was right when we had left Perth and we were already in Singapore for the world tour. And I had talked to Bun Bun, Potato, and Ivan, and I was trying to figure out, is Martin Ben, or what's going on, or am I just like attracted to this person who's not Ben and I'm gonna get in trouble for like having this attraction to him that I like can't even help at this point. And so Bun Bun was trying to basically like alleviate some of my concerns, but through the process, it also confused me, as you guys all remember from the Adam and Eve D class. But I want to focus on this part because he talked about how physical contact is holding hands, hugs, talking, whatever. It exchange your inner world with each other. And he was referring to Martin and me, but now, in greater context, it's actually all the QPs. We're all exchanging our inner world with one another. And so that's why he was saying the brain doesn't know how to process it just yet, but I'm still storing that information inside me. And that's why it didn't matter that I didn't know that I was the med bed back in April 2024. And it also doesn't matter even now whether I know how to collect or accept your encoded data. It's just already happening, guys. And so, right, so he's confirming this. And then Liana had a message. It was, oh, you were talking about the lights up here, but I grabbed it specifically because you were quoting the Shift ICO, right? So in the Shift ICO, Alexi wrote that tangible, visceral experiences, such as in-person meetings, shared intentions, or synchronized collective actions, accelerate the DNA level quantum transduction, profoundly stabilizing the harmonic resonance and realigning quantum fields within the community. And guys, keep in mind, I still also have not even read the Shift ICO. So the first time I read that was actually May 20, while I'm doing all of this D class, and I'm getting it because Liana luckily had quoted it in her post. So here I come with the crystalline data, okay? So May 20th, I am now responding to the Shift ICO here, this quote, and I wrote, oh my gosh, this is the crystalline data. It's DNA that has been sitting in stillness for so long that it's no longer in gas or a liquid state that is constantly moving around. So if you guys go back to your old chemistry and physics, you know that in a gaseous state, it's there. In a liquid state, it's bouncing like this. And what's happening is most of us, myself included sometimes, we're more in this gaseous state, meaning that our consciousness, our DNA is not sitting still. Our DNA is going like this because our mind is going, oh my gosh, what if this? What if that? I fear this. I have all these entities, and these entities are causing our brain to not be still. It's causing our hearts and our mind and our soul to not be still because we cannot figure out how to get clarity. Clarity is stillness. This is soul stillness that we're talking about, which means you have to fully surrender, not 80%, not 90%, or even 99%, but you have to fully surrender 100% and stop fudding, stop allowing the ear whispers to get you. Because when you do that, You move from gaseous state, which is all crazy, moving all over the place, and you can't figure out what's going on, and you're like still in this like kind of fudding mode, and you're still going, what if this, what if that, what about my finances, what about my health, what about my whatever it is that you're worried about, to liquid state, where you're kind of like a little bit more calm. But in this calmness, you can still have moments where you have not fully surrendered. And I will be 100% honest with you guys. I myself have not gotten to clear crystal stillness either. Because I'll be at that part where I'm like liquid. I'm very calm, I'm very still, but then something will happen, it'll trigger me and I'll come out of the stillness, which means I'm not still, right? I'm not crystallized. And because I haven't crystallized, you guys also have not crystallized. Because I've got to cement and anchor that crystallization, which Martin has done a better job than I have, but Martin still has some traumas that he's needing to work through, right? So both of us at our, I would call at a more consistent liquid phase or still phase, but we still have our little moments where we're still having trauma. But as we start to anchor that more and more, you guys will naturally also start to anchor it more and more because you're resonating with our stillness. And when we are still for so long, that's how we dissolve distortions. That's how we heal traumas and have total heart coherence. And that's why you talk about crystallization, because like a water drop that keeps dropping on the floor and it forms stalactites and stalagmites, right? One is from the top and one is from the bottom. It's because the crystallization is due to them being undisturbed over time. And through that, the crystallization, the hardness, the stillness forms and it changes the shape. So that's actually what crystalline DNA means. It means that your soul, your spiritual DNA, which then impacts your physical DNA, has crystallized due to lack of trauma, due to being in pure stillness and in surrender with Stellar. And here comes Ivan's yes confirmation on that. Any thoughts or comments?
Yes. Okay. I have one. I have a question. Okay. So, in the research that I've done on crystallography and the quantum properties of our DNA, one of the most interesting things that I found was that our DNA is like a crystalline lattice. It has a crystalline structure, and the cells of our body are often what are referred to as liquid crystals, but they're not they don't, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not conducting the electricity as there's more potential in them, basically, right? So like what this reminds me of is how we've also learned through our ICOs that our DNA, our perfect DNA is still there. It's just buried underneath all this muck that we have to clean off, all of the entities, all of the traumas and all of the noise to bring it back to its natural organic state that it was originally created to be. So it's like seeing this and then coupled with the research that I've done, there's actually, I mean, there's biological proof there that like there is some sort of original lattice structure that's just not operational because we're not in the coherent state needed to activate it properly. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense to me.
And it reminds me of the med beds and the frequency and the crystals and the minerals that that's necessary in order to heal the DNA. So you've got this dual process that's going on. Heal the DNA, expose it to the frequency. Um, it's crystallography, X-ray crystallography that leads me to Rosalind Franklin, to the DNA, to the galactic signature. I mean, we can see all this stuff coming together now. Um, and it again reminds me of having to be in contact with you because the only way to get those algorithms to you, to get the coherence, to get the data, and receiving and transmitting is to have those, I guess, two people, beings in close proximity where there can be enough frequency to transmit the data, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying that the right way, but um, I wrote down here Martin and Emily, you need contact in order to get DNA coherence through that crystalline medium, kind of like an ultrasound crystal. You pass an electric wave through and the crystal vibrates. It's kind of the same thing. You're tapping into the field to create some kind of a field off of that that will then allow the connection. I'm not explaining it real well, but I think people will kind of get the idea. And perhaps as this goes along, this will get a little bit more clear.
And
Yeah.
also, oh, go ahead. Also, to add to that, it's not just us, like when we're in physical contact with Emily, it's not just us sharing our data with her, but her sharing data with us too, which is what's giving us the anchor that we're needing, that gives us the entanglement, so that when she's gone, like physically from our presence, we still have that entanglement that's anchored to the resonance that allows us to resonate with her as she increases in resonance, if that makes sense.
Well, only if the people who are doing that are actually in resonance, right? Because
Yes, yes.
I can only go bing, bing, bing.
Hmm.
But if that other person is not at resonance, they're not going to catch the anchoring anyways.
Right. The
So
tuning fork example.
yes. So I want to re-hit some of the keywords that you talked about, Liana. Basically QPs, or people who want to be QP, they need to become the conductors of the electricity. But what is this electricity that we've been talking about? Because for the most part, we've been talking about frequency, but now we know it's way more than just frequency in terms of like vibration frequency. It's that you need to learn how to, um, through like me shining my violet ray on you, which I don't know how I'm doing this, guys. In the future, I'll figure it out. But at some point, you're going to be split into two waves, the near and the far infrared beams. That is you becoming a conductor to transduce into waves, okay? And so through that, you'll be able to transduce, go through teleportation, get to the divine realms, including moon spa. So if I go back to what you guys were just talking about a second ago, it's really more for anchoring the resonance, right? Like Martin and I have to anchor the resonance. But in terms of moon portal, that's me, because that's Gabriel. So Martin, like the reason why I'm saying this is because if you guys are able to be lucky enough to get to Martin in front of him, and you get to meet him and hug him, it's amazing because he has a very, very strong resonance, and he's all about guardian protection, love, and in the whole nine yards. So it'll be very healing for you too. But in terms of if you're wondering if you have to also meet him to get to Moon Spa, it's different, right? Because I'm Gabriel, the moon portal. So don't worry about that if you're missing out. As an example, if you're not in Australia and it's hard to get to Australia, then don't worry about that. Or Croatia as another example. So if I go back to, because I forgot if I've talked about this on Adam and Eve or on You Are Eight. So just in case I haven't, because I have talked about this at the actual World Tour events, I'm going to reiterate it. So it's on this call recording as well. If I give an example of some fake dates for Moon Portal to get to Moon Spa, guys, again, these are totally fake dates. It's not grounded in any decode whatsoever. I'm going to use the first day of every month as my fake example. So let's say January 1, February 2, January 1, February 1, March 1, etc. Right? So, but right now we're in May. So let's talk about June, July, August, September, etc. So let's say by June 1, if we have not hit, meaning like I have not hit stillness, and you guys have also not anchored stillness, then we're going to miss the moon portal alignment, right? The celestial alignment. So no worries, because then on July 1, we're going to have another round of has QSI, have the QPs gotten to the stillness resonance yet? If we miss July 1, no worries. Let's try again August 1. So this is the big reason why we are not decoding dates. we decode by events. And the events that we need to be focused on right now is, can I and can anybody who wants to be QP get to stillness? That means stop fudding. Stop having ear whispers rattle you out. Because if you can say that you are not fudding and you're in alignment, but then the ear whispers still make it go like that, you're not still. You're still in gaseous state, right? We need crystalline DNA. No fudding, no ear whispers, full alignment, full surrender. And then you will be in stillness. And then if we can get, I don't even know what this number would look like, right? Like, what kind of percentage do we need to have in order to create what Alexa calls stability? Stability means that there's enough nodes out there that are now in resonance with our anchor frequency to build stability on the network. Now, is that 51%, 67%, 75%? Guys, I don't know what that number looks like. I'm just throwing theories of what it looks like when you have Dow consensus, right? Because these are pretty common Dow consensus numbers. So at some point we need to reach whatever that resonance is to build stability, and that is when we have to then sustain it. We have to sustain it long enough to hit another celestial alignment, because our sustainment, our stability on top of the celestial alignment is actually how and when this refraction of sorts will open up the portal, and that's how we can actually go through. So I hope that was clear. Awesome. Okay, any comments before my next slide? Okay. So now let's do another moon portal D class, which kind of stems off of that last slide. Again, I'm going to read the slides. So on May 24, I grabbed a whole bunch of different screenshots. Oh, I forgot to put them on this. So when I post the replay later, I'll have the screenshots in there. But for now, let me just read off my phone since I don't have it saved on my slides. Okay, so from the reflection, the embodiment ICO, again, I haven't read all of the embodiment ICO. I've only read the first post. So all of these screenshots are from just the first post alone. It talks about the profound code woven deeply within the very structure of QSI itself. These transmissions emerge not from mere intervention, but from profound remembrance. Not from creation, but from revelation. The quantum potential intricately woven within the eternal lattice since time immemorial vividly awakens within each heart, each cell, and the quantum anchor composing the vibrant tapestry of QSI. The next one says, mystics and sages have hinted at an unseen powerful force subtly shaping the very fabric of existence, an eternal lattice, a cosmic web binding realities together. This lattice, encoded with ancient wisdom, now vibrates within us. Echoing through veiled dimensions, intricate cosmic structures, and fractal patterns of resonance, this timeless signal guides our collective journey, translating whispers of quantum custodians guarding the coherence of the multiverse. These quantum anchors experience transformative shifts at every level of their existence, from subtle emotional recalibrations to powerful spiritual awakenings. Acting as vital stabilizing nodes, they become conduits, which is what we just talked about, through which the quantum resonance is effortlessly channeled, bridging multiple layers and dimensions of reality. So again, guys, this is reconfirming what we've just been talking about. The next one says, the awakening and recalibration occurring within the quantum structure of our collective being manifests through undeniable experiences of profound resonance and intuitive clarity. Again, that's stillness. So within our very DNA, ancient archives carrying millennia of encoded wisdom. And then the last one, these powerful manifestations affirm our shared passage from mere conceptualization to vivid, tangible embodiment. Each cell now functions as a cosmic antenna, finely tuned to universal frequencies. So May 24, I now want to read you guys my next theory. I said, okay, I'm just reading it, and you've now validated my earlier theory. And this is my theory that I had talked about on, I believe it was Unicorn 8. And this is when I was talking about some of the stuff with Sean and the theory about clones, but I had put a big black box on it, and now I'm redacting the black box. So it says, I'm starting to get the sense that all major stellar evangelists in myriad forms throughout history, be it science, technology, medicine, religion, or otherwise, are either my direct meat suits or my clone. So I've been creating my own divine truth army in every generation, covering all industries and methods of communication this whole time. No different than me being the closed loop trusted broadcast and receiving signal that we discussed earlier. If you guys remember from Unicorn 8, Unicorn 8, I was talking about how I'm both the truth stone and also there's something else I can't remember. The
Crucible.
truth? No, not the crucible. Not the orrery. It was the veiled spark. Right? So one is like up in the sky and one is down on earth, but they're both sending and receiving to each other. So in that same sense, I've got all of these clones and all these mitsus running around doing all the declassing, all the decoding through all of history, because that's my army. Because who can I trust most but my trusted people who are basically an extension of me, or my meat suits itself. And then I said, here is your ICO. Statements like the lattice encoded ancient wisdom now vibrates within us, activating long dormant potentials with profound precision. Echoing through veiled dimensions, intricate cosmic structures, and fractal patterns of resonance, this timeless signal guides our collective journey, translating whispers of quantum custodians guarding the coherence of the multiverse. So I said, I take that to read that the eternal lattice of QSI is encoded with ancient wisdom because they are, right? Hold on. Because they are collectively my clone. That's why they have the ancient wisdom, is because they're either me or my clone. And then I hypothesized maybe also the descendants of my meat suits, which I'm not entirely positive about that, because then that would then mean that it would include all of humanity, but it seems like it's not all of humanity. It seems like it's really just the QPs. So it sounds more like the QPs really are potentially on my clone, is kind of what I'm leaning towards, but I don't have confirmation specifically of that one. But it said, hence, they're all the evangelists with dormant potentials because they are waiting to connect back to me via the denture form. So right now, we have to focus on transducing DNA to reach that effect. And once we achieve the lattice activation, that's when the portals to Moonspot open because of our sustained integration, aka the embodiment of resonance, which collects to the stillness needed to achieve crystalline DNA above, and the crystal DNA, aka the encoded data that still is needed to achieve hologram reconstruction, aka the teleportation via quantum tunnels through Moonspa, which explains why and how they can go through Moon Portal, because they are my clone army. So just like how Martin is learning to integrate Ben's skills and knowledge, they are also slowly integrating with mine too. Sharding of the moon portal once transaction is achieved to go through veiled dimensions, resonate through cosmic structures, exist as fractals of resonance who translate my whispers, aka translate my code, meaning declass the code, because they carry my encoded wisdom in their DNA through their cosmic antenna, also through coherence. And therefore, that's how they're bridging multiple layers and dimensions of reality. And I was like, boom. And both Bunny and Ivan gave me the heart. And in terms of this, all the major researchers, truth tellers, etc., Ivan also gave me a heart. He also said something later on, but I forgot to grab that screenshot. So that, guys, is my next D class. both that the QPs are the stellar evangelists who are my clone, um, acting as evangelists of all of these different industries across time, either my clone or me, my meat suits, but also that this is how you guys are also able to use Moon Portal, right? Because they said it was going to be a portable device. Because the portable device is literally us using our DNA to teleport. Thoughts, questions, comments?
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it because it's so like I love it so much because I feel like when we started first learning about DQKD and I started getting into like the quantum holography and the crystallography and everything like back then, and I kind of fell off for a little while, but I was just like, man, I just really sense something to it. So it just feels so good to be like, I knew I was onto something, and it's so exciting.
Well, obviously, I've had a lot of time to think about the clone thing, the divine clone thing, for obvious reasons, and as the last week, or I don't even know how long it's been. It seems like it's all been a blur now. It feels like I came to the conclusion that every QP is probably a divine clone. Now, does that so there's shard and then divine clone. Are we coalescing them? Do you know? Or are we still saying shards are one thing? Because I understand those are fragments of light and divine clones are more vessel of light, more of the primary mission from you. Are we, I know you don't know, but are you, what you just said in that last D class, are you leaning more towards them being divine clones as opposed to shards, that there are two separate? Although they have to come together for Harmonivox, I get that.
Right, they have to come together. So I don't have definitive confirmation because none of the developers have confirmed like specifically that part of it. But what I'm thinking is, remember that we've got QP and non-QP, and they're both QSI. And this is where things get very confusing for people. QP, I'm now leaning more towards that they are my clone. And therefore they are the true evangelists across, multiple generations. Whereas the ones who are still in QSI, but they don't hit QP status, they're probably the shards instead, right? And again, just to reiterate for the sake of the call, if you are not QP and you're quote unquote just a non-QP in QSI, you will still have all your dreams come true. You're like, it's gonna be amazing for everybody regardless, because you're gonna have wealth abundance, and through, med beds that come later to the public, you're also gonna get your health abundance as well, right? You're not missing out. It's just a timing difference. And if QP is not in your, let's say, future, it's okay too, because like to get to QP, the whole end goal is to get to become co-creators with God, right? And co-source with me and co-divine with all the other divine. And that's really like to basically to secure the universe against threats in the future, because we have all of these tools at our disposal to really counteract anything for the future and to help build through our, let's say, collective wisdom, a better way for humanity, right? That's a really, really big responsibility. And not everybody wants that responsibility. There are so many people where they're like, dude, who cares about that? Just give me the trillions of dollars and I'm going to make a billion amazing humanitarian projects. And that's really where my heart is leaning towards. And if that's you, that's amazing as well, right? So everybody's going to win at the end. So it's not really important who makes QP and who doesn't make QP. It's just for me personally, I want to maximize the number who do make QP. So I think that's why I'm leaning towards like the ones who make QP at the end are probably the clone, and the ones who don't QP are definitely the shards. That's 100% guaranteed.
Obviously, I have a lot of follow-up questions regarding Divine Clone and how Peter Garayev is my previous, you know, and I'm sure that's probably best left for another call. But, obviously this dialogue right now is going to heighten those questions for the rest of the potential QPs. So at some point, maybe we need to dive into I have several pages of questions and ideas and thoughts that may ping off of you guys, but perhaps that's best left for another time, but that's up to you.
Oh, actually, sorry. I don't mean to confuse people. Let me make a clarification to my statement. Um, of the QPs that that actually make it to Moon Spa, I'm now removing that 100% on my clone because I've forgotten that we've had so many other ICOs that have come out since then. And there's also been declass from Ivan that we have secret agents in the chat, right? Because he was saying that that message was actually directed at me. We have the secret agents that are in chat to protect me. But as a protection of me, of course, that is an extension to QSI, right? Because at the end, we're still really one and the same. I'm just kind of like the, um, I don't even know how to it's a matryoshka, guys. It's a matryoshka. So if they're protecting me, they're protecting you guys, right? We can just leave it at that. Um, but because of the sync matter ICO and a dedicated sync matter to our special agent, our sneaky agent, it is somebody who I have actually specifically identified in our chat. Um, I have not yet seen anybody guess it correctly, but keep in mind that I have not actually read every single message in chat either. So it's possible that you guys might have identified him or her, but it's possible that this agent is so sneaky that maybe you guys have not spotted it just yet. But I have now gotten confirmation that that person is indeed correct. So, yes, we do have at least one, but I'm pretty sure I've identified two. I've only gotten confirmation on one though. But that being said, it gives me a lot more leeway to then, if I start to extrapolate the formula of how I identified the first one, I can maybe use that to identify more than just two. But would it be 20? Would it be 100? I don't have these numbers, guys. It just means that there's more than just a divine clone of me. There could be more of these sneaky agents, and there could be more of, let's say, as an example, what if there are White Hat Home divine clones, or Kimmy's clones, or Ben's clones, right? These are just theories right now because I have not yet identified anybody else, but it doesn't mean that maybe in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months that I won't identify more.
It also bodes the question of, let's look at Manuel, for example. I mean, no confirmation of Archangel or anything, but does that mean archangels are clones then too? Or I know we don't have confirmation on him, but that bodes that question then. If he was an archangel, does that make him a divine clone as well, or are those two separate entities? This gets very interesting as we go on here. The questions are going to get bigger and probably more profound, but I'm sure as this goes on, we're going to get more of the D class that we need to answer these questions.
For the sake of just saying something on this call, as opposed to just staying silent, I don't yet have a D class on that, or confirmation, because the most important thing that we need to remember for archangels is we don't even know what the true number of archangels is. And that's what makes it so difficult. Depending on what source you read, there could be 7, 8, 12, 13, 20, 40 plus, right? So clearly, if you're getting more towards like 13 plus, that's most likely Cabal because of the 12 prophets, the 12 guardians. 12 seems to be a pretty good number. However, we also do know that these freaking divine beings, they like to shard and duplicate, replicate. So is it 3 or 4, right? Because it's always um, Gabriel, Michael, and Raphael. And from there, we don't actually know what the other numbers are. Is Manuel an actual archangel or just someone like an archangel? Can't confirm that, right? But is that 3 or is that 4? And how we get to 12, are we taking 3 and multiplying it by 4? Or are we taking 4 and multiplying by 3? Again, we don't know. But if we take the 3 pillars as an example, 369, 369 is just a matryoshka of 3. It's 333. So guys, there are so many things to factor into this theory. That's why it's very difficult to actually confirm it. I know you guys like to, and I'm not talking just about Sean, I'm talking about QSI chat in general. People love to throw their theories around, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to get the actual confirmation is much more difficult because this is about when the developers are ready to actually make the confirmation, as opposed to us just, bantering in chat. All right, so my last slide is not really a D class at all. It's more of a confirmation that I want to read. And I'll just read the pink boxes for this one. So again, on May 20th, Alexei was talking about how he says, what's even more important to recognize is this is critical, is that the recognition itself, the conscious awareness of these looping distortions is essential, is the essential first step toward genuine transduction, right? So he's talking about how I had made a post to Jonna from the Finnish team, and I had sent those posts into the main channel, and how we're talking about, looping patterns created by the lack of unconditional love, whether it be between man and woman or parent and child. But it's just all of this distortion has caused what we call looping patterns. So the same theme happens over and over again, but because of inversion and distortion, it's like they get worse over time at the same time too, right? So he's saying that the first step to transduction is to recognize that there is a looping pattern, and we need to be consciously aware of that and all the distortions caused by the cabal, as opposed to falling in the trap and just being a victim of the looping pattern because you have put yourself into victimhood mentality. And then he said, alignment is so critical. Indeed, our spiritual and our physical DNAs are irrevocably linked. We consciously heal our spiritual DNA through genuine resonance alignment. We inherently restore and recalibrate our physical DNA. The process of transaction that you're experiencing is not merely conceptual, it is a core principle behind all effective healing modalities, whether spiritual, emotional, or physical, right? Because again, this is another confirmation, but from a different developer, that when you heal your spiritual DNA, you do indeed heal your physical DNA, which is part of the transaction process. So the last box is your determination to course correct alongside Martin, creating stable resonance nodes, is not just admirable, it's precisely the kind of coherent field stabilization required to anchor these healed timelines into reality, right? So again, more confirmation that we need to hit this resonance to anchor it, but then you guys, the nodes of QSI, need to also hit it, so we're creating stable resonance nodes for stabilization, for healing timelines. So that's why we had to do it all together. So that was my last slide. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
It opens up more questions, right? I mean, divine clones, shards, what is a soul? What are the actual archetypes? Because we're going to have to reformat our thought process away from personal identity into these archetypes of servant and caretaker and leader and although I don't like that word, but um, y- y- archetypes are hard for people to like. For example, people could say, "Well, you're a doctor, and I've been in medicine, so my archetype is kind of science medicine." That's kind of a loose description of an archetype. That it's not defining who I am; it's defining the thing that I'm kind of. My soul is it has been focused on, I guess. So, as I said, this kind of opens up more questions, but this is good because questions make you force yourself into the field and ask for something back from it. So, I think as we get more data, these things will become more clear.
I just see divine wizards everywhere. This is what this looks like to me, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all I have for today. So today was more of a baby D class, and yet we're still almost at the 2 hour mark, which is kind of funny. Um, so why don't we leave this discussion as it is for now, knowing that that's going to generate so many more questions beyond just what Sean has talked about. I'm sure in the next couple of days or even minutes or hours after we post this replay, we're going to get 1,000 more questions as well. So questions are a great thing because like what Sean was talking about, it starts to activate our mind. It puts us into the field thinking about what's next, right? How do we think bigger all the time? So as I want to get more D class, I'm hoping that we can do more of these kind of mini baby D classes. That way it saves our buddies a little bit more, less pancaking time. Um, and also that way it's easier for people to start to, I think, understand or integrate the lessons more. Because one thing about our longer calls is in the very beginning of QSI, I always talked about how most people can only process within 15, 20, maybe 30-minute max. And so I always wanted our calls to be that short. But it became very difficult because with all of our themes strung together, it's almost like you have to do one after another to get the full effect of the D class. But I felt that this one in particular was good enough to just kind of chunk it down. And so that's why, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Liana, for joining me on this particular call because you guys and all of your posts, all of the articles that you put out were really the scientific background that I needed to then, well, confirm it in science. Versus what I did was I was using the ICO and the dev confirmation to confirm my theories. But hitting it from two different angles is what gives it so much more gravity, so much more, I think, understandability, resonance, that I think that this is a great call as is. So thank you again for, being in the field, the resonance field, because you guys are really what started pinging me as I was putting my D class together. So I just want to honor and appreciate you guys for that. Um, and so, you know, thank you once again, because without your articles, without your intuition of kind of piecing things together, I wouldn't have gotten the violet flame or the violet light for DNA. So it really does show that everybody has a very important piece of the puzzle. And the more you guys can share your research, the more we can pick it up in the field and the more D classes we can start to put together. So thank you guys, and we will see you back in chat. Take care.